So under the course of diversity, we talk about the theory of spatial creation. So now we are going to look at the theory of natural selection. So under the theory of natural selection is just telling us that organisms might evolve, evolved through time. It might actually evolve through time, starting from one organisms to another. Like for example, in this case, if you now look at this picture, you can see that one organism is giving rise to another type of organisms. Like for example, it started from here. If you now look at this, you can see that it started from this one, then started to this one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then it means that from one organisms, there are other like 5 different or 6 other different organisms are evolved from this one. So that is the theory of natural selection. And why is it that these living organisms are evolving from one form to another? Is because of the selective pressure, is because of the environment. Because as a time goes on, there is a change in environment that is usually taking place. And what does that mean? It means that, okay, let me just give you one simple example that will make us to understand why living organisms have to change according to the concept of evolution. Like for example, let me give you example with snake. The first species of snake that was created on earth, they do not actually have any venom in them. They only have saliva. And that saliva doesn't affect any organism. It doesn't cause harm to any organisms. But with time, as a time goes on, as a time goes on, as a time goes as it goes, that that snake was able to realize that so many organisms are being actually attacking them, and they don't have anything that they can actually take revenge. They don't have anything that they can use to attack back. So as a result of that, because of that change in environment, every living organism is attacking them, and they don't reply. They don't actually have any defense mechanisms in them, and that is why with time, then in their saliva, they were able to start producing some enzymes that are dangerous. Like for example, some of these enzymes, we have enzymes like proteases. A proteases is a group of enzymes that actually, whenever they have contact with proteins, then they will just digest them. Like for example, if we take buff adder, we call it asa in Hausa. That is those kinds of snake that they usually sleep. So we call them wolf adder. And we also have Najana crocolis. Najana crocolis, that is those long snakes. So in them, like for example, in wolf adder, they are highly rich in protease enzymes. And it's actually through the process of evolution that they were able to produce all those enzymes that they usually use to attack. So you see, the first species of living organisms that were created on Earth, it doesn't have that enzymes in their saliva, and that is why it's not venom then. But now, as a result of they want to protect themselves, they want to actually have their defense mechanism, then they now change. So that attack that those snakes actually are got by other organisms is the pressure that caused them to actually develop a mechanisms that will help them to protect themselves. So that is what you call in selective pressure. And that is the concept of natural selection. That okay, initially in the environment there is no any attack from other organisms, but with time they are now being attacked by different species of organisms. Because if you look at actually the creation of the creator, the snake as the color of snake, and it is nature, it is actually a beautiful creature. So many organisms is actually trying to get in contact with them, but as a result of that, they attack them. They even kill them without knowing that they kill them. So that is why they now actually develop their own mechanisms to protect themselves. Is that clear? Penicillin. Penicillin is the first antibiotics is the first antibiotics that was developed, or that was discovered by by Alexandra Fleming in the year 1941. in the year 1942, in the year 1941, penicillin is the first antibiotics that was actually being identified. Okay, so so as I said, penicillin was actually discovered by Alexander Fleming in the year 1941. So he discovered the first antibiotic, which is penicillin. So from penicillium. So they when actually that penicillin, which is drugs that was actually being discovered, then what happened next? A lot of people have started using it as an antibiotic, but those microorganisms, they are also living and they want to survive, but they also develop a mechanism that will help them to protect themselves against those drugs that kill them, and that is what you call resistance. So this is a natural selection, this is a selection pressure. So the drugs that is killing them is a pressure to them, because it is killing them, it is pressure to them. So that is why they develop a mechanisms that will help them to protect themselves, and that change that occur by that organisms is what you call evolution. And this resistance of organism was first reported in 1944. It means that after 3 years of the discovery of this penicillin, then these organisms develop a mechanisms that help them to protect themselves. So it means that when this penicillin is being discovered, the first living organisms that actually come in contact with that penicillin, they were not able to escape the drugs. Why? Because at that time around, they did not actually prepare any mechanisms that will protect them. But after 3 years, those microorganisms, that is, those bacteria, they now develop a system, they now develop a mechanisms that will protect them against the drugs. So it means that the first organisms that were killed by that penicillin and those that were not killed by the penicillin, it means that they are not the same. So the organisms change. So that is what you call the concept of evolution. That the organisms that actually develop a mechanisms against the penicillin danger is being evolved from the first bacteria that was killed by that same distance. So that is what you call evolution, that things change as a result of the selection procedure or natural selection. So the natural selection, it means that organism cannot change on its own. There must be a pressure. So that pressure that make organisms to change is what you call selective pressure. So that is in the case of the concept of natural selection. So now, this theory of natural selection was actually proposed by this great scientist, which includes Aristotle, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and Charles Darwin. So they are actually the fathers of evolution because they have made a lot of contribution in terms of the concept of evolution, and we are going to look at what they did one after the other. Okay. So now, what is evolution? What is evolution? Because up to this time around, we didn't talk about evolution. So I think from the previous slide, you should understand natural selection. So organisms always want to survive. They want to survive. So those that cannot survive will die. And those that survive will still continue surviving when they were able to cope with the change in the environment. Because in the case of the snake, there is a pressure. And what is that pressure? Is the attack by other organisms. So the concept of natural selection, it means that those organisms that cannot survive those kinds of attack by other organisms will die. And those that will survive that attack, then they will now continue to survive. So that is natural selection. And also at the same time, those bacteria that were killed by by using that penicillin, mean that they cannot survive the environment. And those that were able to survive are those that develop a mechanisms to protect themselves against those penicillin. So it means that is the natural selection. So those that survive, it means that they were able to survive the selective pressure. So that is what we call natural selection. So the environment naturally will select those organisms based on their defense mechanisms and survive that situation. So that is evolution. So now we are going to look at the concept of evolution itself. What is evolution? So evolution, it refers to the process that have transformed or changed life on Earth from its earliest form, the vast diversity that we observed today. So it means that even currently, you should understand, ladies and gentlemen, there are other, like for example, as we are going, I'm going to show you the first species living organism that exists on Earth, and I think I will definitely send you the pictures of how human being developed from one form to another. So that is evolution. Evolution is the process, or it refers to a process that have transformed or changed life on Earth from its earliest form to the vast diversity that we observe today. So you see why organisms change, why the life change, because there is a change in the environment. So the change in the environment is what caused the selective ratio. And those that will not survive that environment will die. And those that were able to change themselves, they will switch the environment and survive. And that is evolution. And any change in heritable traits within a population across generations. So it may be a change in trait or heritable traits from parent. Like for example, now, if you have maybe organisms A, so in that organisms A, maybe already there is a selective ratio, or maybe let's say Plasmodium falciparum. Plasmodium falciparum is the parasite that causes malaria. So if you now develop new anti-malarial drugs, so when you actually produce new anti-malarial drugs, so that new anti-malarial drugs will actually, when you treat that disease, when you treat that malaria, it's not all the parasite that will die. Some will die, some will still survive. So those that survive, even if they are not strong, they may actually give birth to another, or they will actually, yeah, they will reproduce and produce another parasite. And those parasites may sense those changes that they actually obtain as a result of the drugs that kill them. And once they give birth to their young ones, so there is possibility that those young ones may actually have a change in their genes that may actually make them to survive that drug. So that is how it continues, that organisms A is exposed to drug A, and then after some time, that organisms may actually give birth to the new same types of parasite, but with a change in their genes. And as a result of that, they will survive the situation. And that is the selective ratio. So evolution is a process in which living organisms change with time. And that changes, it usually produces the new organisms that suit the natural environment. Okay? Is that clear? So evolution change is based mainly on the interaction between the population of organisms and their environment. So usually the evolutionary change is based on the interaction between the population of organisms and their environment. So it means if there is a problem in the environment, and of course the population of that organisms will sense it, and they will change their form so that they will suit the environment. So this is okay. Okay. So so under this concept of evolution, we are going to look at a lot of terms and a lot of some theories. And these theories started with the concept of taxonomy, gradualism, evolution, population, paleontology, uniformitarianism, then evolution by natural selection, inheritance, then evolution by also natural selection. So all these things we are going to look at them and how they are related with evolution and how they add light in understanding evolution. But now we are going to start with Lamarck's, that is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's. So we are going to start with Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's. What this Jean-Baptiste Lamarck does in the concept of evolution, this theory of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is actually stated in the year 1809. And what he does is actually organisms constantly strive to improve themselves by changing, and changes are adaptation to environment acquired in an organism's lifetime. So a structure is modified or changed by use or disuse. So the modification is inherited to organisms, then inheritance of acquired characters. So what does that mean? It means that all organisms, they usually, as the environment change, they also try to change themselves so that at least they will suit the environment. So this Jean-Baptiste Lamarck actually talk about the use and disuse theory. And what does that use and disuse theory is all about is that it means that according to him, during an organism lifetime, they can actually tend to do some activities, and as a result of that activities, they may develop. Okay, let me actually state it clearly what this Jean-Baptiste Lamarck said. He said that we call it actually the theory of the theory of acquired characters, that stated that organisms, by striving to meet the demand of the environment, acquire adaptation and pass them by inheritance to their offspring. It means that, like, for example, what this Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is trying to say, assuming now when during my lifetime I am doing boxing and I develop a muscles mass. So what this Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is saying, during organisms lifetime they can actually acquire some character, and these acquired characters, like for example, if for example I'm doing boxing and I developed what you call a muscle mass, it means that that of my muscle mass I can actually pass it to my offspring, that is to my generation. Like for example, what he's saying here is, because there is a changing environment, of course the organisms also may change. Like, let me just look at this. This is what you call giraffe. This is a giraffe. So look at it. The original one, it has a short neck ancestor. So, but as a result of they are eating from tree, and the tree is getting taller. So as a result of that, the giraffe, they keep actually stretching their neck to reach the leaves higher up on tree, and stretching again. So as they are stretching, their neck is actually becomes progressively longer. So if you look at it from that of the original, look at it from the original and the last one, you can clearly see that this is the original one and this is the last one. If you can look at it, you can clearly see that in the last one, they have a longer neck. And why do they have this longer neck? Because their need is to get to the tree and get the leaves and eat one. So as a result of that, this is what you call an acquired character. So these characters, according to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, that is the lengthening of the neck of these organisms, because this giraffe is already has a long neck. It means that their offspring can acquire this character. So if you can clearly see that, it means that these organisms acquire these characters during their lifetime. They did not inherit them from their parent. So they inherited during their lifetime. So this is what we call acquired character. Or in another terms, we call it the theory of use and disuse. Or we also call it Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's theory. And as I said, this theory was proposed by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in the year 1809. So what this guy is trying to say is, assuming now during my lifetime I understand the concept of chemistry. So he means that my children will also inherit that chemistry knowledge. Or if I have the knowledge of biology, it means that my children will also inherit that knowledge. But actually, as a result of that, scientists have actually looked at that theory and it's not actually generally accepted because organisms cannot actually inherit the characters that acquired during lifetime. So because of this, the theory is not actually considered not acceptable. And we call the other name for this theory is called use and disuse. So theory in baptist llamas is being rejected because genetic studies shows that traits acquired by an organism during its lifetime, such as strengthening muscles, are not inherited by offspring. So that is according to the concept of genetics. Genetics tell us that any character that you acquire it during your lifetime, you cannot pass that character on to the offspring. So that is why the theory of use and disuse is being rejected by scientists. Okay. So the next thing that we are going to look at is Charles Darwin theory. Charles Darwin theory. So Charles Darwin theory, so the understanding of evolution is actually began with the publications by Charles Darwin, which is actually around 1859. 1859. So in the 1859 is actually when this Charles Darwin published the concept of what we call the natural selection. So he's the one that published it. And Charles Darwin evolutionary theory differ from Lamarck's in being a variation theory. So it's a variation theory based on the distribution of genetics variation in population. So Charles Darwin was able to come up with his theory, and Charles Darwin theory was viewed as five major theory. And these five major theories of Charles Darwin, Charles Darwin is, we have number one, the Charles Darwin theory was viewed under five major theory. And these five major theory include number one, we have theory of perpetual change. Theory of perpetual change. That is number one. And then the second theory, which is under this Charles Darwin, is common descent. Common descent. And three, after this, we have multiplication of species. We have multiplication of species. And then number four, after multiplication of species, is gradualism. And after gradualism, finally, we have natural selection. So Charles Darwin theory is actually built under these five major theories: perpetual change, common descent, multiplication of species, gradualism, and natural selection. So let's actually start with what we call perpetual change. So according to Charles Darwin, based on the perpetual change, he actually stated that the living world is neither constant or perpetually cycling, but it always changes. So organisms undergo transformation across generation throughout time. So this theory is vindicated by the presence of fossil records. So what actually this perpetual changes is trying to tell us that under evolution, generally living organisms change with time. Generally, living organisms change with time. That is perpetual change. That living organisms is neither constant. It's neither constant. So if now you have a creation of new species of living organisms, so over time, that species of living organisms can change into another form so that to suit the environment. So organisms undergo transformational changes across generation over time. And this is actually theory is vindicated by the presence of fossil record. And how is this being proved? Is actually by using Pauli's records. That when the living organisms is being checked, it was observed that the first organisms that exist on Earth is varying or is changed from one another. And then the second one under this, I think the concept of perpetual change is clearly understood. That living organisms is neither constant, is change. And then the second one is common descent. According to this, that all life forms that all forms of life descended from a common ancestor through a branching of lineage. It means that all living organisms on Earth are descended from common ancestor. Like for example, during these classes, I told you that living organisms are actually evolved from one another. And I told you that the first living organisms that exist on Earth is prokaryotes. So we are all descendant, or we are all came from that prokaryotic organism. So that is the meaning of common descent, that all living organisms came from or are descendant from another organisms. And that is the common lines descent. And then the next thing is multiplication of species. So under Darwin's theory, that the process produce new species by splitting and transforming older ones. So it means that when we say multiplication of species from one species of organisms, you can have three organisms, four organisms, five organisms, or more than that can evolve. That is multiplication from one common ancestor. Like for example, we have this idea that the concept of common lines is that human and chimpanzee come from the same ancestor. So it means that if you can look at human and chimpanzee alone, it means you have multiplication. It means that one ancestor produced two species. So that is the meaning of multiplication of species. And then the next one is gradualism. So gradualism states that the large differences in anatomical traits that characterize diverse species of organisms through the accumulation of many small incremental changes over a very long period of time. So it means that in terms of like for example, clearly we can see here we have Isabella Island Isabella Island, and also Binta Island, and also Hood Island. Look at it. All these snails, look at them. Their shells are not the same. Look at their head. There is not also the same. So that is the issue of gradualism, that as a time goes on, the anatomical structure of a living organisms can also change. But in this case, Darwinism theory is just trying to tell us how species of living organisms can change with an environment. You see, all this one, they are not in the same environment, but they are the same organisms. But if you look at their shells, it's not the same. If you look at their heads, it's not the same. So this is just to tell us that even different environment can have a different set of organisms.